Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. My name is Gabriel and I'm a test engineer. Today I would like to share with you a few hints on how you can automate performance tests execution with Jmeter, Jenkins, Maven and Git. And we should touch on also some topics that extend that idea, namely about where to go further and, for instance, implement containerization with Docker, or maybe look at taurus provided by Jmeter company. So to get you started, let's have a look at the short agenda. We should talk a little bit about why we need to automate performance tests execution. That shouldn't take us more than 5 minutes. Then I would like to spend much of the time of this presentation showing you actually how you can automate execution of JMeter tests with Jenkins, Maven, from scratch basically, some from a very basic scenario, and also how to connect that to the GitHub repository. And perhaps we conclude with what I've just described, so some ideas to extend that base scenario of automated execution of performance tests. Alright, so in the simplest scenario, a performance engineer develops a test on his local machine, then he uses JMeter user interface to run the test against the application under test. That's usually how it looks like when you start developing anything. When you run the actual performance test, you need to provide result to the customer, and then you would probably be running that in a non-user interface mode, which is obviously a reasonable thing to do. Now, depending whether you have a need to use Jmeter distributed farm, you might also want to do that here. And it's quite fine, but it lacks some things. Well, that's why we need to extend it so that the execution of our test no longer depends on a single individual, that we can keep JMix files, so JMeter tests as code in GitHub repository, and that we can use some scalable compute to execute them. So for instance, JMeter farm, whether this is built from Docker or whether this is set up manually, that doesn't really matter for us in that presentation. But what we want to have is we want to have some orchestration mechanisms such as Jenkins CI or maybe TeamCity to run our tests that we develop and version in version control systems such as Git. And throughout this presentation, we'll use GitHub to host our Git repositories. So what we want to basically, we want the flow to be, I'm writing a test, but I put everything in the code and I version that with Git. Then I configure Jenkins so that it downloads my test from Git, it executes it automatically using the JMeter farm that is provided somewhere against my application under test, and then it feeds back the results to me in a form of report or raw results. And obviously, usually we also attach monitoring to application under test. So we're going to build that case in the demo that follows. So I will now close the presentation and we'll start with actual tests and building this setup. Okay, bear with me while my screen is loading. Okay, that's just fine. Now, first thing probably we need to have on our computers is JMeter. So usually you unpack JMeter to some directory, and in order to run it in the graphical mode, you just click JMeter path in Windows, and JMeter should open up. Which takes a while, as you can see. Alright, as soon as it opens up, this is what you should be able to see. I've prepared a very simple scenario, well, quite simple scenario that we'll use throughout that presentation. Now, because before I can show you what it looks like, I will explain what it does. So we are going to stress this Google site. We're going to create 2 users. One of them will be just visiting Google main page, depending on the environment, in different languages. So we'll visit German site, Spanish site, if we wish so. And the second users will have a session that will consist of opening the Google page and then also opening the Doodles page. So it's just to give some randomization to user sessions. Okay, the script I've already provided here, and I can load it up to JMeter. You can just do drag and drop. And this is how it looks like, so I'll just make it expand so you can see all of it. Well, writing JMeter test is not a subject of this presentation, so I will go quickly through what it does. So in user variables, we just provide some traditional values like rampant period for the threads, max users, which is equal to the number of threads we're gonna get in here. We have some environment parameters. Based on that, we either visit Spanish, German, or Polish version of the site, and then we have also some wait times for HTTP and additional variables that are not so important. Here is the distribution of the users, so we want to have 50% of the users going through the main page and Doodles, and just 50% going through the Google page. And in the threads, we'll be picking up the session based on the random value which is achieved in here. For the purpose of this presentation, I just showed that it runs, and this will be available in my GitHub repository to see later on. We just need something to work on with. Okay, and this run, as you can see, we have some randomization here. So we have users that just go to one page and users that go to another page too. Oh, sorry, so user will just go to one and Google goes to 2, so it's the other way around. And then we do a bunch of stuff, but basically we do it, and here we can just say that we want more users and more everything. Okay guys, so we have our scenario, and when you develop, then you usually do it here. You're adding items and you are writing bin shells probably too. But if we want to automate the execution of the performance test, then we should see how we can run them basically without the need of a graphical user interface, because as soon as we know how to run those tests, then we can automate that on an external tool like Jenkins or TeamCity. So in the beginning, we're going through 4 basically ways of doing that. First is using native JMeter binary with parameters, running these or remote servers too. Then I will show you how you can do pretty much the same with Docker, Taurus, which is a place meter tool, facilitating running of tests, and then we'll go to Maven, so how you can also run tests with Maven. And in the end, we'll take on the Maven way of running it, and we'll implement that in Jenkins so that users can just go there and click it and it's fully automated. So let's start. First way is the most basic way. I'm here in my catalog where the JMix file is, and if you want to run it, then basically the only thing you need to do is to execute the test by providing the JMeter bot script the name of the test to run, and that should have the same effect as running Fregu. And you can see that we actually run 11 requests, so everything worked fine. We have no errors too. We just run it. It's so simple. This is how it actually looks like. So obviously it's a very short command. Another way of running tests, if you want to provide obviously some parameters, because we usually want to provide parameters, is a good practice to externalize the options. Then we can do it in the pretty much the same way, but here I just created a script instead of a simple command where I just put in the variables, the paths. I'm deleting the results folder, and then I'm calling JMeter with a call method in bat. This calls from a bat file, another bat file, and if it fails, then script continues. So that's why we use call. You could skip that too. And then we are using non-graphical interface, providing the name of the tests and the results file. So let me show you that you can also do it like that, and we should expect exactly the same results, more or less, obviously. And again, we had 11 requests, which is what we expected. Okay, so if we have such a script, then obviously we also would like to extend it to override some parameters, because we have some parameters in here, for instance, max number of users, which equals to the threads that are going to be spawned. If we want to override, then we provide a -j option, and we can also provide an option to execute the tests on the remote machine. This is one of my remote machines, which I pre-configured for this presentation. So let it run with overwritten parameters, but this time on a remote server. Another way of running this. Now we should expect more than 11 requests, because, well, we doubled the number of users. Okay. And we have just run our tests on a remote machine. I think that, oh, there is some typo, that's why. It's probably a typo. Let me run it again. Okay, so now I'm running the test on a remote engine. Hopefully it's not busy, because I didn't check whether it's busy. Okay, but it didn't pick it up, so let's do it like that. Okay, so our test now executed with on a remote machine, so it's another way that we can run JMeter tests. And we are still using JMeter, but directly we depend on something that is on our disk. Now I would like to show you how we can do exactly the same thing, but using Docker. Docker is like container orchestration tool. It allows you to do lots of stuff, but basically it allows you to create services, basically. So we are going to go to my place where I created, well, I think it's here. I've prepared already some Docker files for this presentation. So basically, Docker file is a description of a service that you want to build and run in the Docker environment using certain execution environment as a base. For instance, a very tiny Linux distribution. Then you're basically downloading something to it, configuring paths, and then the key thing is to specify which is the binary that should serve as entry point to the service. So basically what should be exported out of container. This is how on the Jmeter configuration looks like, and when you have it, then you can build it. If you don't have it, with that command, but I've already built it, so I'll skip that, it takes some time. And then you can actually run the Docker container which holds Jmeter to execute the tests. So the key thing is here to have a look at the run script. So what is exposed from the container, as you can see, what I'm exposing is Jmeter, which is downloaded there and put into the path in the container, and all the parameters that are provided to that script. So basically I'm rewriting the parameters that somebody provides to the container to Jmeter one-to-one. And this is how this is achieved. And if you have a look at our example for Vodka, then the execution of the container is basically looks like that. So I'm running in the container Jmeter and providing the standard stuff, and Vodka JMX is our scenario, basically the same, it just changed name and some additional Docker configuration like mapping volumes so that we can read results on the Docker on the local disk, because by default once the container is done, well, it just wipes out everything, so it doesn't persist. So we can run our tests with token container too. That should have this effect. Okay, it seems it worked, and as you can see, we've actually executed the test with Docker. We don't provide any special parameters. Now, the results, because we mapped our current directory to the Jmeter results one, then we can go here, and if we do it like that, then you can see that on top we have our results, so we can navigate there, and the results are persisted on our locally mapped machine share, which is exactly what we want to do. It's just another way of running Jmeter tests, which can also be integrated with Jenkins. So let's close this, and let's show you also taurus one. So other options that you have is using taurus. Now, using taurus is pretty straightforward, but there are some things you should know about it. So first of all, what is taurus? Taurus is a tool created by, let's say, a company called Jmeter, which is well known in the world of performance tests and basic tests. It's a test automation provider, and the aim of this tool is to automate the execution of various tests, and that means also performance tests. And if we talk about performance tests, then Jmeter is probably on top of the list. So if you want to use taurus, then you can install it with the following Python command. I won't install it because I already have it, so I just show you I have it, and it requires Python. It also requires Java. So though the tool is written in Python, it depends heavily on Java because Jmeters run on Java, so you just need to have it. If you are here in the Docker, in the taurus directory, where you can find actually on the script to run taurus, which I will show you in a second, then there is one thing that I like about running taurus. That's the complete command. You just provide the BZT, the description of the test to run, but please have a look. Here we have YAML file where we describe actually what's contained therein, and then this is the way how we override the variables in the YAML file. And the YAML file itself, it just allows you to easily read what you're gonna do. So it's more, let's say, easily readable than XML file or any other file, because it puts some structure, and it's very popular these days, popular standard for configuration files. So here we are providing the name of the path to the JMX file we're gonna run, and this is how we can override the properties in YAML file, because we can also do it on runtime. That's why I provided that example. And then we can also specify that we want to run it in the distributed mode, and this time we're going to run it in free remote nodes. But for that we need to place the JKS file and tell it to Taurus here, because the communication between Jmeter in version 5 requires that to have. And then we can use this command to execute our tests. Okay, so let's do it. You will see that Taurus provides you some pretty cool stuff as I'm doing that. First of all, what should pop up is the graphical user interface, and then you can also have a look at your test results live if you provided here your token. This is my test token, so you're free to use it. It's not secret by any way, but it has limitation. Okay, so Taurus will actually download its own JMeter. And as it runs, it will provide you graphical user interface. It will also allow you to see your results live. That's why it's very handy for sharing results of multiple runs between people. Or, for instance, comparing in an easy way historical results. Okay, so you see, well, all my free remote servers have been initialized, and I can have a look at this live, what's going on. Here we have our requests, and likewise we also can have a look at that here. Okay, it's loaded up now, so it's very handy. So you can have a look at this in your free time. It's also something you can integrate with Jenkins. That's exactly why I'm showing that. But to be honest, all of that brings us to showing you how you can run performance tests with Maven, because the Maven is the way we're going to use to run performance tests on Jenkins. Now, what can we really do here is we're gonna do something like that. We're gonna generate Maven project. Maven is a build and dependency management tool mainly used for Java, but it's generic, and it allows you to store your projects only as a code without dependencies. It will resolve all dependencies for you. And in the case of Jmeter, it means that the only thing you are actually need to have is JMX file, and all other dependencies, including plugins or Jmeter, will be downloaded for you by Maven. So in order to use Maven, you just need to have Maven in your path and Java, and that's it. And exactly the same thing we're going to expect on Jenkins. Okay, so let's have a look at how Maven generate command looks like. So this is how it looks like. We're going to use archetype to generate our example project. So let's just move back. Let's go here, and let's generate some example projects from archetype. Archetype is a template that you can use to generate a Maven project. Here we're using archetype quick start with the most basic configuration. As soon as we have it, it probably makes sense that we open it up in some sort of IDE, and I will use for that purpose IntelliJ, which is my preference. But I would just make another change because it's a pretty long path. Therefore, I will copy it here, and I will open our project here. Here it is. In order to open Maven project, you just need to specify POM file and click Open as Project. Bear with me while it loads. Okay, here we go. Oh, just too many clicks at once. Okay, we just need to wait up so that IntelliJ can index our files in here, but the base stuff that we're gonna get is some very standard structure for Maven project, and we are also gonna have here the POM file. That's the most important thing we're going to extend in order to run our JMeter tests, and that's basically it. We have a base, and we just need to extend it. First thing that we need to do is we need to specify that we are going to use the Jmeter plugin. It relies on some defaults. The thing that we need to specify is the name of the file to execute. And now, in order to be sure that our project is correct, we can run Maven commands. For instance, we can make sure that our dependencies are resolved, which should be fine because we actually only added here a plugin dependency. So dependencies should be fine. And here we are also going to check whether our plugin can be resolved. But it should be because it's public. So the default configuration of Maven should work for you quite fine. Okay, it's a success. Now, in order to run the Jmeter file, test file here, the command to execute is Maven verify, because the plugin assumes you're doing that in the integration test phase. And that command should fail now, and we're going to see why. Okay, it failed because such a directory doesn't exist. The plugin expects source test Jmeter to exist, so we need to create that. And actually, that's the place where plugin will by default look for Jmeter file. So for instance, for example, performance tests one. That's why we need to copy it here. So let's do it right now. So I can take that file, I can copy it here. And now that should actually guarantee that this time it's a success. As you can see, JMix file is not meant to be edited by a human being. Okay, and as you can see, the Java process is being started, and the binary execute is target Jmeter because Maven has downloaded Jmeter for you. As you can see in the bin directory in here, it's a complete Jmeter. And this file is executed with Java, basically. Okay, let's just wait for it to complete. Okay, it's 11 requests again, so it's a success. We just run performance tests with Maven. And we didn't need anything special for that because Jmeter has been downloaded for us exactly the same way like with Taurus. But obviously, let's just have a look that it's not enough because we have some parameters. So if we're going to use Maven, then we need to be able to change those parameters. For instance, we have max users here. So in order to steer with the parameters, we should be creating Maven properties first. I will create one property for max users. I will create one also to be able to change the scenario if we put here more scenarios. And now if you want to use that, then here we can just replace that with test scenario. Okay, and the properties you can pass to JMeter by changing the configuration block, and we're gonna change both the local properties, which are going to be used by plugin when you run tests from local machine, and the ones that will be sent to remote machines. If you want to use remote machines, and we want to use both. And then the command to run is like this. So for instance, let's use 6 users. Okay, as it runs, then let's just facilitate running of those tests by creating a bat file. Well, I create that in a separate directory. Let's call it run batch. I'm a lazy person, so I will create a bat file which basically runs the POM, the Maven command. I'm just specifying where the POM is. First I'm cleaning the target, and then I'm running those tests with a parameter. As you can see, it's been successful, and we run 13 requests, so it kind of shows us that it accepted that parameter. Okay, so we have that. Let's just execute both statements at the end. So what if you wanted to run it on the remote machine? If you want to run it on the remote machine, then there's one more thing that we need, and this basically is the remote config. And we can run it in here. Let's also externalize the server list. So let's create another property. And by default, let's provide it with that stuff. Okay. Now let's use our script to run it. It's Windows. Now our test should be executed on remote node. By default, it will take the one that's provided in here, but we could override this too. Okay, so just make sure that it runs, and this is a good practice to execute that is exactly the same, that it's going to be executed on your external environment, so on your CI/CD environment. Yeah, let's give it a minute. And as you can see, we are executing that on the remote one, and max number of users has been overwritten. Okay, well, it failed because if you want to run something on a remote machine, then obviously we need also a key. So I had a key here, and we need to copy it to conf, test conf. So we need to create another folder, which is the default plugin. And here we need to copy the key. And now we can rerun it. And that should actually be a success this time. Well, I should really change the default number of users to 1 just to reduce the time of this example test. Okay, again, we are running this on the 17 node with number of users 6, which we set in the script in here as Maven parameter, and Maven took it, overrode the default value and provided it to the Jmeter script in that place. As you can see, we are executing now on a remote node, and the execution is successful. So basically, what we've done is we store now our performance test as code in a Git repository. Well, it's not Git repository, but now it's a Maven project. We can run it both on remote and local machine because Jmeter is downloaded for us by Maven. We externalized the parameters. We provided also some local script to execute it. And now we are basically ready to integrate that with Jenkins. If we want to integrate that with Jenkins, then the first thing we should create is a new repository, which we can do here. I will use the name of Rodka. Let's say 54. It's a public repository, so you'll be able to access it later on. And then you have here all the commands that you need to run so that you initiate our existing repository with Git. So let's do it together. Okay, that's where we should put it. So here you can open git bash. Well, perhaps you don't want target, so maybe one thing I'm gonna do is we create a git ignore file. Well, it doesn't cooperate, so I'll create the git ignore file here. And here, what we want to remove, we don't want to commit, is the target because it's a temporary folder that produces the results of our build. Okay, now it looks better. So now we can initiate here new Git repository. We're gonna open the git bash in here. And let's just do it. Let's just do git init. Let's just add everything. And that's fine. Let's just add first commit because Git won't allow us to push. And we say where our remote origin is, and then we can push to master. Usually you won't be developing tests on master, you're probably gonna create active branch develop, and once the test is kind of a first time production ready, you're gonna make changes on feature branches and merge to develop and then tag on the master. Okay, it looks like it worked, so we should have now our tests stored in Git. That's great. Now we can go to Jenkins. Jenkins, once you install Jenkins, then the only thing you'll really be using is the performance plugin. Performance plugin allows you to integrate various reports in Jenkins so that Jenkins can understand, for instance, Jmeter results and provide you with some statistics, whether you want them to or not. It's very useful. So this is what I recommend you to have. And now the only real thing that we should do now is to create some jobs with Jenkins, the base jobs. For instance, Rodka. Well, let's use this one. We're gonna create folder first. And in that job, we actually tell Jenkins to use Maven to run the test file, or actually the project that is contained here. That will allow you already to store your tests as code and execute them in a consistent way. I should invest in more memory, I guess. Yeah, it takes some time. Okay, so this is our folder, and in that folder we are going to create now a freestyle job, and we can call it Frotka 54, let's say. I think it's a nice name. Oh, it already exists, so let's create this one. We're gonna need the link to our GitHub repository. We can take it from here. In source code management, we need to provide a location of the project. Let's wait so it picks it up. Oh, we can click in here, it's public, so okay, now it has a connection. And now in the build, we need to specify that we want to invoke top level Maven. Use the Maven that's provided for you. We'll use clean verify. Why? It's exactly the same reason why we are doing it here. So we're first cleaning our build temporary directory, and then we are using the verify command. So this is what we are going to use. We can do it like that. And let's provide users. We use 2 users, and that should already work, but we also do another thing. We are parameterize the project, and we're gonna add simple string parameter. Let's call it max users, exactly the same way. Let's give it default value. And instead of writing it like this, let's use Jenkins variable in here. We've saved it, but we'll do one more modification. That should be enough to run the test, and even with parameter that we can provide on the build time. But we also want to have some early look at the results. That's why we are going to use the plugin that I show you. And in that plugin, we'll tell it to consider CSV files as source of results. And now we are ready to run it for the first time. As you can see, Jenkins will ask us for the parameter, and it will pass it to the Maven, and Maven will pass it to Jmeter, and Jmeter will accept it. So it's kind of lots of passing of things, but once you do it first time, it's going to be easy. And now what's going to happen is that Jenkins downloads the project. It will now take some time to actually populate the workspace, and that can take some time because when you do it for the first time, it starts with a clean repository. It's kind of a concept of a clean build. You always start in a clean environment, so it needs to download everything, all the plugins that we need, for instance, Jmeter plugin, but Maven also downloads itself. So that's why you see all these things being downloaded in here. So Maven uses itself to download parts of it. So probably takes some time. But once it's done, it's basically where we stop for today. So When this is over, then you can provide simply the link to the job, and everybody, your developers, teams, project managers, can execute the test, provide parameters, extend the parameters, provide all of them actually to fully control the build, and many more things. But it's just the first steps to further automation, which can be achieved with pipelines. So the possible extension of that is using Jenkins Dsl, which is a topic for another full presentations, and create C jobs to generate pipelines of code, including your performance tests. So you can chain deployment jobs with functional tests, with Jmeter tests, and have it stored as code. You can also go in the direction of containerization of the Jmeter setup, but also of application under test. So we can, using compose app docker, start the application, start Jmeter farm, or maybe you want to run it on a swarm and execute tests and provide you results. Why not? So these are the possible extensions. But we are lacking one more thing to be successful in here, which is we want to see the results. Well, we are still some time from there, but it shouldn't be so long. I guess we should also sum up something that we've done. We started with a very basic scenario, which we executed with simple command. Then we showed how we can script it in bat file, how we can provide and override some parameters from the scenario itself. We showed how you can use taurus as an alternative that will download its own Jmeter. It will also show you the live results. It will show some very basic graphical interface, so you can see your test results as you run them. We also showed you how you can use YAML file to define that, and then we showed how you can use Maven to generate the project, how to run it with Maven, how to configure a Maven project to accept parameters, and also to be able to work with remote nodes. And then finally, we put everything on GitHub. We configured Jenkins with performance plugin with a job that is fully parameterized, or can be fully parameterized and executed and shared. And the only thing that's left now, it's us waiting for the test results. I need to admit that the next time I need to run it before. Okay, as you can see, we are already downloading Jmeter. So these 5 minutes, it's kind of a must wait to resolve all the dependencies. But I will make my best to improve next time and run it before the presentation. But I think from the other side, it's good to see what exactly happens step by step. And you can see that we are now in Maven Verify. So we download everything, and now we are actually executing it exactly the same way we execute it here in IntelliJ with that script. And as you can see, the test is being run on the remote machine because it's the default config, and it accepted our changed parameter. Okay, let's see. Success. And as you can see, we have some dashboards in here that we can go through. And then we also have last report details. And as you can see, you even go into having reports on things like individual requests and embedded resources requests. You can also see what's the sample time of bean shells and everything. That's actually a sample here. It's a bean shell, so it's very handy. And obviously, as you go and actually start using that, you will see that it's very useful. Okay, and I think that's it. I wanted to thank you for your patience. If you ever plan to extend that, then I would suggest that you have a look at Jenkins Dsl, Seed and Groovy jobs. If you want to connect to me, then you can visit my GitHub repository, download it for yourself, or you are invited to connect to me on my LinkedIn account. If you have any questions or you need any help, then usually I'm responding, so I'll be happy to help you. So thanks for the presentation. I hope that it was interesting for you, and that you'll be able to use that in your professional career. Thank you, and have a nice day ahead.